All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of Bullets, Barbells, and Barbecue. I'm your host, Brett. I have Chris is back, the artist formerly known as Heavy C. We got Matt. Tanner the Head is with us. And we have a special guest. Matt's going to give us a little rundown of her.
Awesome. Yeah, today we have Niki Kubiak, who is a fantastic dietitian and a really, really good runner. Done lots of long distance running, marathon, like you do running coaching too, ish. A little bit of that, more of the dietitian type stuff.
More the food side of it.
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
But works with all kinds of people, right? So like I worked with her years ago when I was competing. It's how I got to know her. But she works with, I'll say athletes as I point to myself, as well as
using that term loosely, apparently.
Yeah, there'd be air quotes. Yeah. Athletes, people of all kinds. And recently kind of has started to work with my wife, who's a PA and does like orthopedic surgeries. And so I think you've had a couple people come from her who need to like cut down on some weight before they can do surgery. So they get into like kind of healthy weight range. Yeah. So just all around, just great resource and much, much more intelligent than us on a lot of the stuff that we ramble about. So excited to have you today.
Thank you. That was quite a very nice introduction there.
Yeah.
What's your kind of background, like education-wise, kind of where you got started, how you got into it?
Yeah, and so I was actually hoping you would ask that question because I think there is some confusion between the term dietitian and nutritionist. So I thought if I had a chance, I'd sort of clarify that today because it's important to know the difference. So my background really is running. That is what led me into nutrition. I joke that I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, and I was 100 miles from a mall, but I was 4 miles from a national park. So I was outside running all the time because that's all there really was to do. And my love to run sort of led me to be more aware of how food and nutrition affected my performance. Because when you're in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, you don't want to fall apart on a run because no one's coming for you. Like at 15 years of age, I kind of figured out like, I got to survive out here on my own if I'm going to be out here.
Was there like a specific instance where you're like, oh shit, I fucked up?
Yeah. Yes. So I was several miles into some single track trails and had a low blood sugar and had to get myself back to my car. And I was, 15, 16 years old. And so I started paying attention. If I had a great run, what did I eat the day before? And then started mimicking those patterns. And so then I ended up getting recruited to UNO and fell into their dietetics program. So I didn't really come into college thinking I was going to study nutrition, but it just was a perfect fit.
Yeah.
So I had that opportunity to compete in college while I was studying nutrition, and I just kept applying and learning, which was really, a great way to be hands-on and see the impact that healthy nutrition would have on my performance. I also stayed relatively injury-free through college, which was kind of rare. I came in with an injury, but got over it and never had any injuries after that. And then I was able to, so back to the question of dietitian versus nutritionist. So with dietitians, when you're working with a dietitian, you're working with an individual who has a 4-year degree in nutrition or food science. They can have a food science undergrad as well. And then the Commission of Dietetic Registration ensures that to become a dietitian, you have to complete a 1-year internship, which is really competitive. And now there's more students than there are internship positions. So it's really difficult to become a dietitian right now. But you have to complete that internship in a hospital setting. You're getting coached by all these dietitians. You're working in clinical. There's a big clinical focus. I was actually told in my internship that sports nutrition was not a viable profession.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I was like, well, that's okay. You can tell me that, but that's still what I'm going to do for a living. And so I pursued my own, routes of achieving that goal. But in the end, you have to get this internship completed, and then you take a board exam, and then you can finally work. Okay, so on the side,
how long is that?
Is this like a 5-year deal then?
A 5-year deal.
Okay.
Yep. And to be a nutritionist, you can have a criminal justice degree and say, hey, I'm a nutritionist. There's no licensure. There's no regulation. So I always encourage people, really make sure you know who you're working with. Because you could work with a nutritionist who has a 4-year degree in nutrition but never did the internship. they're probably going to have a better background and understanding of things because they're still going to get the medical nutrition side of it all. But if you really want to make sure you're working with somebody who can help you, you really want to look for that RD credential after the name because it definitely guarantees a certain level of competency.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then my background. So then I went all over the place. I've worked in community health. I've always loved sports nutrition. So I've always done that as almost a side hustle because you have to pay bills, right? So I've done a lot of community health work. I've done a lot of teaching. I've just done part-time teaching at like Creighton. I did sports nutrition. I got to teach a sports nutrition class at Creighton, which was fantastic. And then I just took a new job recently for the Department of Health and Human Services. So I'm going more into a public health job again, working in management. But I'm really hoping I can still be effective at a kind of a more systematic level.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. My career's taken me all over the place.
You still have like your side hustle going, right?
I do, which I'm trying to figure out how in the world I'm going to do that and what that's going to look like. Might mean a little bit of a wait list because normally I would try to get people started within 2 weeks when they would contact me. So please still contact me, but just know it might be a month or two before I can get you started, just depending on how much time I actually have. So, yes, and I met Matt because in this interim of my life and all the places I've been and worked, I had an opportunity to work for a developing athletic training facility that started in 2015. It was called Infinite Sports World, and the owner had a great vision. His vision was so broad, the resources got spread a little thin, and then COVID hit. Yeah, and because our resources were spread a little thin, we couldn't sustain the club and everything. But it was a great time for me there because that's, you guys, that's where this runner girl learned to strength train, was at Infinite Sports World. Yes, there was 2 coaches there, Tori Robinson and Brett Sheffield, who made it their hell-bent personal mission to change my mindset, and they did. So now, believe it or not, if I have to choose between a run or strength training, because that's all the time I have, I will choose strength training. And I would not do that before. I would have been like, no way, I can't miss a run. But strength training has really changed my running. And you talked about, somebody, wasn't you, Matt, but in one of the other podcasts I listened to, you guys talked a little bit about marathon training and how the strength component really helps to keep, just for strength and stamina. And that I've completely gained that. Yeah. So I did do a 50-mile trail run last summer. That was my longest race. I know. But I didn't have to put in the miles that you would think because I was doing consistent strength training. So I was able to do it on lower mileage, and I handled it great. And so my body held up better through the training.
Where do you do a race like that? Or where did you do that one?
That was back in the Black Hills. I had to go back to my homeland.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had wanted to do this race. Actually, a friend of mine is the one that organizes it, and I just always wanted to go back and do his race. So Centennial Trail through the Black Hills. Lots of
So that was probably super flat.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Black Flats.
Yeah. Yes.
So, you were talking about a degree versus non-degree. But have you also seen cases, like I see it like in like training, I've seen plenty of people with exercise science degrees that are awful trainers because I think some of it's just experience too. But I've seen people with exercise science degrees that are obviously very good, but sometimes I think people go too much by the book. Like, I'm not saying everybody that's done a bodybuilding show should do nutrition for somebody, because also bodybuilding nutrition is also completely different.
So it's a whole beast of its own.
Yeah, it's a whole thing of its own. That's more of a mental game, and how much, that's a whole different thing. But I mean, there's plenty of people, like I know like Tanner does some nutrition stuff with his store, but Tanner's also been around, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you run into that a lot too, because I've seen people who are like, they have a degree, but they're terrible at it because they're just so book taught. Because to me, I always say everybody's like a fingerprint, right? Everybody's completely different. You could give 10 people the same diet and you're going to get 10 different results. Yes.
Which I've never given anybody the same diet.
So I didn't know if you've seen people that are in your field that are bad at it, but then you see someone who, like someone like Tanner, who like has the experience of doing it for so long. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yes. So I would say passion plays a role in that, right? So I have met dietitians who just clock in and clock out, and they're not practicing what they're preaching. They're not living the lifestyle. And so I think if you're not reflecting that, you're not really embracing that.
Like going to get in the fat personal trainer.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa. Whoa.
Hey, I didn't look
Personal
at,
shot, wasn't it?
I didn't look at you.
Oh,
So I don't mean to discredit those
was
that are
about
in
to
the
say.
nutrition field who don't have the RD credential, but I just be careful who you work with. So like Tanner, in your case, if you've got the experience and you've been able to see that what you're recommending is working, that speaks
Well, it does
volumes.
take a lot of time, and it still takes education. Like, you need to know what you're doing, and there are plenty of people in our field that don't. That
I
they
would agree
they
with that.
they
That's
just
what I
think
was saying. Like somebody
yeah.
does a bodybuilding show and they're like, oh, I can do nutrition now for
Or they're
everybody.
just
And I was
naturally
like,
lean.
yeah.
Yeah, or a lot of times, especially with it, I'm sure you've seen with like Instagram, social media, you have to be extreme, right? Like, you have to be extreme to get likes, to get follows in whether you're training or personal training or bodybuilding or nutrition. It's always like, well, let's see how crazy I can push this. So it's like carnivore, vegan, it has to like be, somewhere on the very edges, or people don't like click, because this common sense nutrition stuff isn't that exciting.
You make so many good points with that comment right there. So I recently did a presentation on like a motivated mindset. And so I had to really dig into the building falling down, guys.
Yeah.
Usually.
Okay.
It's settling.
somebody's working on the bathroom. It's fine.
First day I come here and it falls down. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's,
So with this motivated mindset, it kind of, anyway, what I read, I had to research tons of psychology, and there's basically two mindsets when it comes to making diet changes. So you either have what's called a fixed mindset, and so that's where you want the diet. You just want that prescription. I want to just follow a keto diet. I want to check off those boxes. I don't really want to learn anything. I don't really want to change my life. I just want to check these boxes and I want to see the results. And then there's this other mindset, which is called the incremental mindset. I'm getting all psychological on you guys. And that's where people are a little more focused on the learning process over those immediate results. And that's where you really start to see the lifestyle changes and the commitment to the boring process of
Yes.
learning, the basics of nutrition and actually eating vegetables
Well,
like that.
yeah, like I had a lady in, I posted her results, but she's lost, 60 some pounds and 16 or 17% body fat over almost 2 years.
Yes.
It ended up being like 72 weeks. I'm like, someone else was like, that's so fast. I'm like, it was less than a pound a week.
Yeah.
It was consistency. She learned how to do it.
And now she'll keep it off because
Yeah.
she did
She'll-
it the right, healthy way.
Because if she has a crappy week, she's fine. She knows how to fix it.
Yep.
And sometimes life happens, or you have a birthday, an anniversary, kids' birthday parties, and you're just like, hey, I'm checking out for a week.
Yes. And so part of my nutrition philosophy and practice is you got to live a normal life. So I drink, I eat. My favorite food is chocolate chip cookies. I'm going to eat chocolate chip cookies. But it's learning to balance it in and make sure that those foods don't push out the foods that allow you to perform and do what you want to actually accomplish in life. And I think I learned that at such a young age that I've just kind of always naturally figured out there's good and bad to it. And you got to find that happy kind of sweet spot with it.
Absolutely.
I don't eat vegetables, but
We know.
yeah,
We can tell.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's okay, Chris. Only 1 in 10 Americans actually eat vegetables. So the recommendation is 3 to 5 cups. Yeah, this came out on the CDC.
I eat broccoli.
Research.
That's it.
Hey, that's a good
Yeah,
one.
that's
That's a
about
good
it.
one.
Maybe some carrots.
But yeah, in 2019, the CDC did a survey, and 1 in 10 Americans eats the 3 to 5 cups that are recommended of vegetables every day. So when we look at kind of the mindset of America, like people will tell me all the time, I eat really healthy and I can't lose weight. I hear
love
that all
Yeah.
the time. And I'm like, okay, so what did you have
Let me
yesterday?
see your log. Let me show me what you eat.
Yeah. Yeah. And you went through what you were eating
Yes.
back when.
What I was going to say before about the diets and how you want to learn about dieting, I think when you've been overweight your whole life, it's really easy to go with a diet that you can just follow, and it's really you're once you start seeing the changes, then for me it was a little different because then I wanted to know why my body changed, and because I didn't want to go and get fat again. But I think that's a big part about it because people will just do that diet. They're like, oh, I lost my 40 pounds or whatever. And then they go back to living the way they lived before and they gain it all back. But once I got to the point where I liked messing with my body to see what it would do. And you have to be patient with things like that. You know what I mean? It's not just you can't just change a little bit of your diet. Then you're like, oh man, that didn't work.
You don't eat vegetables on Monday.
I did it I ate that salad for a week. Well, it didn't really work out for me. Look, I don't look any different. That's another part. We talked about this before. People aren't patient anymore, and no one wants to wait for anything. And it takes time for you to mess with your body to see how you're going to react to certain things. You can't just do it right away. And I think when you're super overweight and you've been overweight for a long time and you get a fixed diet, you could correct me if I'm wrong, it's easier for people just to look at it and say, oh, well, I can just do these things and I am getting some results at it. But where it falls off is when people don't learn why they changed, why they did that, and how they need to continue that on into the future. Lifestyle changes, not just 6 months or 8 months or whatever it is.
Yep.
And then everyone yo-yos back up and they're like, that diet sucked. It didn't work. Well, it worked, but it's the word diet is where everyone gets hung up on.
Well, life happens.
Yeah.
And there are times you have to run
Exactly.
through Chick-fil-A, and there are times you have to grab fast food, and you have to learn how to make those choices, or you're not going to have success.
Yes, and I would totally agree with that. And I think I really liked the podcast that you were featured in because, again, you guys highlighted so many great things. And it's really, again, it's that word moderation, right? And even when you were in that track where you weren't eating as healthy, it sounds like you knew it. But you just have these habits and these routines, and you were working a lot. And I think people sometimes feel a little bit stuck with that. Like, oh, well, this is just what I got to do. And I have to eat from Quick Trip and I have to do this and that. But the learning process, when you start making those changes and you start actually connecting.
It's definitely a lot easier just to buy food, but it's so much easier than prepping your food. But once you figure it out, I was pretty lazy with it because once I figured out my then I just ate the same thing every day when I was, and that makes it easy because then I can just weigh everything out. Same thing every day. Obviously it's super boring and you will get tired of that eventually too. Like now, how I maintain my body weight is for 4 days a week, I eat the same thing. And then the 3 I eat whatever I want and I drink.
How do you feel with that?
I feel pretty good with
satisfied?
it. Yeah. Those 4 days do kind of suck. I'm not going to lie.
We have something to look forward to at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean?
Those 4 days I eat the same thing every day, like 2 pieces of bacon, 2 eggs, 90 grams of oats and a cup of milk and then a little bit of honey, for breakfast. Then, 8 ounces of beef or 8 ounces of chicken or 6 ounces of beef, some rice and snacks in between that I, always have measured out. That's what I eat all the time for 4 days. And then my 3 days I don't really eat. I don't eat whatever I want on those 3 days. I'm not really going.
You're just less stringent.
I'm not going like I'm not
You're
like,
eyeballing
all
your
right,
servings.
we're
You're
gonna
like,
hit this
about right.
China buffet up here, and then for dinner we'll go by Godfather's, and then I'm gonna eat a gallon of ice cream. It's not quite like that, but have some cookies, drink some alcohol.
And then, typically if you look at individuals' meal patterns, most people eat the same foods for 2 meals a day. There's really only like one meal that people tend to vary. And so it can be healthy patterns. As long as those meals that you're eating consistently are healthy, it's okay to eat the same thing every day. The boredom factor is, something. I mean, you could add some broccoli in with that.
Yes, exactly.
Spice it up a little bit.
But
You can change your chicken out.
yeah,
But I think
some
with that,
different spices.
I always felt like seasonings and like your sauces can make a huge difference. Because I would even do that with clients. I just do because I do like some nutrition with clients, and they're like, "Well, I don't want to eat the same thing every day." And I'm like, "Okay, well, what do you want for breakfast?" "Well, every day I have this." And I was like, "Okay." And like, what do you
Most
want
people
for
just
lunch?
switch dinner.
Yeah. Well, because like you said, I think the one that's always different is dinner because you're with your family.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But for the most part, they're always like, "Well, I have this for breakfast. I have this, but I don't eat the same thing every day." And I was like, "Cool. All right. Well, that's exactly what you're already doing."
Yeah.
And I don't think they realize it.
I don't think people want to be painted into that spot where they like, oh, I want to eat whatever I want. I don't want to eat the same thing every day. But if you really think about it, a lot of times you do eat the same thing every day.
I think the average person only eats like 17 different foods.
Oh, that's
like-
interesting.
It's very, very, it's very
that number?
small.
Okay.
Yeah, they were talking about it when I was doing a class or something. They were talking about most people only eat like 17 different foods. It's very small, but you can eat chicken in 27 different ways, but it's
Okay.
still chicken.
Right.
It's like
True.
creatures. It's like going out to eat. Most people don't really go out of the circle around their house.
True.
You know what I mean? Like most people, like, where should we go eat? Oh, we haven't eaten at this place for a while. And you'll name like 3 places, but like especially like Omaha, there's like 1,000 other restaurants. You're like, yeah, I don't know. There's nowhere I want to eat at. You know,
Yeah,
like,
nothing sounds good.
yeah.
You
And
know
if
what
you're
does
like,
sound good? Porky butt sounds good today.
I always try to go, but out of that 2-mile radius, you know what I mean? Like most people don't venture out of, and it's the same thing with food. Like you said, I don't think.
Well, just because you go to a different restaurant doesn't mean you're going to order something different. Oh, this is like exactly what I get at the other place. Perfect.
Yeah,
That's what I'll
I
get
know
here.
I like that. So I'm
yeah,
not,
and that's what I'll get.
the only
here.
time I don't try different foods is on vacation because I don't want to like shit my life away on the plane or something like that. That's always
That's going to happen anyway.
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the first time I was in Florida, and they're like, "You gonna try sushi?" And I was like, "No." I had never had it. I was like, "Not happening, dude. We're flying out. Like, we're leaving in like 4 hours. It's like, it's not happening." I have made it 41 years without shitting in an airplane bathroom, and I'd like to keep it that way.
It's a good goal to have.
It sounds like you've got a good routine. Let's just
Yeah.
keep it that way. Yeah.
Memorial Stadium. I'm 2 for 2 there right now. So
I don't know. I feel like airplane bathrooms are smaller.
you got to back in and walk
Oh
out.
man, you can't. I can barely pee in them.
Right.
Like you can. I don't know how
I can
you
I can
get
put
in
my
there.
butt against the door and my head on the ceiling and still not miss the toilet.
Yeah.
They are that small.
Yeah, it's. I refuse. I try not to even like. Well, first of all, I try not to even stand up on a plane if I don't have to, because I hate making people move. Because I'm gonna try the window so I can sit like at that awkward angle so I
Window?
can fit in the
No.
seat.
Bro, get the aisle and you can lift up the armrest.
Yeah, then get
Well, you know what I
annihilated
used
by
to
the
always
drink cart.
But I used to smoke by the drink cart
Yeah.
every time I'd sit by the aisle and they just come hammering through the drink cart.
Just fall asleep, get taken out by the drink cart.
Dude, anymore, like I've been upgrading to first class because it's like $100 or something.
Of wealth over here.
Okay. Duh.
What?
And I
It's
sit
only
there.
$100.
Baller.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Do we need to get you a better chair? Are you gonna
Yeah.
be able to sit here anymore?
Yeah. I downgrade to come and hang out with you guys here. But that's money. I'd highly recommend it.
Back
So
to
yeah,
the
we
weight loss. Back
digressed.
to the weight-
I was like, how do I pull this back? I'm not quite sure how to pull
Brett usually does a pretty good job of pulling us back.
I'll let you guys figure
Yeah.
out how we get
Where
back.
are you at on like? And I'm not saying they're not real. Okay, like the food allergy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like we all grew up like. I was joking. We talked about a couple. Like my school, we grew up and you could go back and get like a peanut butter sandwich, and no one was like, "My son's allergic. Don't get near the peanut." Like I don't know where like all this shit like started from. Like I think a lot of people they talk about are lactose intolerant, but as we get older, we don't drink as much milk is probably part of the reason. Like we had John Hansen on here. John Hansen thought he had a gluten intolerance, and I said, "You're being a fucking weirdo." I was like, "It's because you don't ever eat it, and then when you did eat it, it messed you up." I said, "Slowly bring it back in," and now he's fine.
Oh my gosh, you bring up so many good points. Okay, so the allergy issue is real. It is real. Something has changed in our environment that is shaping people's tolerance to foods. And the reason I say this is I have a daughter with milk allergies, tree nut allergies, and peanut allergies. And my dad has a nut allergy to pecans out of my entire family. None of the rest of us have allergies.
So she can't do like milk chocolate then. But can she do dark chocolate?
She can do dark chocolate. You still have to you kind of have to get in the higher percentages.
her
So I
life
have to
sucks.
cook cheeseless, you guys. I had to like learn to
Cheeseless?
cook cheeseless. Yeah.
Oh, and like the dairyless cheese or whatever. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
That vegan cheese at Costco is not bad.
Oh,
Get out of here.
so
Go-
you know,
go
there's
home.
This
Turn his
dietitian.
microphone off.
Gosh, why Chris's mic's on still?
The wife has to eat it. It's not bad. It doesn't melt though.
Yeah. It
Because
doesn't-
it's a fucking chemical.
yeah.
It's not
like
cheese.
no melt.
I put this food in the microwave and it doesn't melt.
Dude, that's
Or
like
I'll have it on the flat rock and it won't melt. I'm like, what is this stuff made of?
dude, that's like tofu. If something doesn't change consistency with heat or cold, I'm not eating it. I can't
Yeah.
do it.
So there is a little conspiracy to the whole allergy development. And scientifically, this is not proven, but there is some thought that the heavy pesticide use in the 80s and early 90s is what is kind of shaping the allergies and the gluten sensitivity and the intolerances and things that we're seeing now. So I'm just going to throw that out there because people are kind of like, what is going on? And I have heard things through my networks and connections that I have that is a possibility.
So like a CIA
with-
over here. She's like deeply connected. She's like, I have some networks of some
Yeah,
people.
I've got special people. I do.
So
And yeah,
with wheat, I know that because wheat is very sensitive to moisture. So if you get like a rain later on, you can lose a whole crop. So they started spraying it with the same chemical they were putting on, like, I think it's the same stuff they put in like Roundup Ready corn.
yeah.
So whatever thing they put in the corn, so they can just spray Roundup all over it. They actually spray on the wheat, and from that point on, like gluten intolerances jumped a ton.
Thank you, Tim.
But a lot of people when they go, like if you
Mr.
go,
conspiracy here.
oh yeah, I'm Mr. Conspiracy. But if you go to like South America, or if you go to Europe, like people with gluten intolerances here can eat the bread there. And when we were in Guatemala, one of the ladies we were with, severe gluten intolerance. You don't get a lot of choice of what you're eating when you're in a third world country. So she ate it. She had no problem. Came back here, thought she was fine. Not good.
Yep. It's these kinds of stories and these
Yeah.
kinds of experiences. I mean, you have to kind of think about it. Now, I don't want to scare people away from eating foods, but I think then it leads to the question of like GMOs, because genetically modified foods are a different way to keep our food supply productive and
To feed 8 billion people on this planet.
available. Yes. So, it's like, what do we do? What do we do? So I teach at Creighton Dental, and I always ask my students in this particular class, how they feel about GMOs, because this is a group of kids that are very nutritionally savvy. Dental students are very nutritionally on top of things. That's why I love teaching the class, because they always ask me really hard questions. And a lot of them are like, down with GMOs. We don't want GMOs. And I'm like, well, then
The planet dies.
you have to kind of think, if you want to walk into the grocery store and get your 6 apples to make your apple pie for Thanksgiving, you're going to be able to do it in the fall, but no other time of year you'll be able to make that apple pie. And the availability of the foods that we want is not going to be there.
Well, I think you need to understand what the GMO is. So,
Yeah.
so my buddy works in animal genetics, and apparently dairy cows have horns and beef cows do not. So that they use the what's the splicer, the genetic splicer? CRISPR. Yep.
Oh,
So they had a company did this CRISPR thing where they took out the no horn gene from the beef and put it in the dairy, because with your dairy cows, basically when they're calves, you have to basically bore their horns out. It's a pretty violent process. So they did that, and they bred two dairy cows that had no horns. Right. And they grew them, and they had a baby, and they had to kill one. And then they had to, they killed one and studied one. But that milk, if it would have came from that, would have been genetically modified.
True.
It would have been genetic. But the thing was, they were just doing the horns, and that would be better for the cow. So I was talking shit about it, and he was like, well, what about this? I was like, okay, well, I mean, that could be a benefit. So I think you kind of need to know what the genetic modification is. I think the problem is that the people who are at the top are the ones that choose, and then they don't tell us.
Right. It was like GMOs, because like all of our dogs are GMOs, right? They've all been selectively bred to have different
That's
stuff,
it,
right?
yeah.
They all came from wolves.
Yeah.
Right. So, but like you can selectively breed crops, which has been happening for 10,000 years, and that's fine. Now you start to get some extremes and stuff, so I think that's okay. But like the GMOs that everyone's scared about are, the chemically modified GMOs, or things that are modified and they change. Like instead of
Like Roundup Ready corn.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Right. And so like instead of just taking away the cow's horns, you take away the cow's horns, but you also add some kind of like carcinogen to the milk, right? There's some trade-off in biology. It's not just a plus one, net. It's like there's some kind of plus and minus to it. And so GMOs, when people throw out GMOs, it's a general term, but I assume that most people are talking about these chemically modified or non-net neutral modified plants.
Because selective breeding and genetic modification are two different things. Like I can just breed chickens with big boobs together and have big boob chickens. So chicken breast. I mean, huh?
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's what they do.
It might
I
work
mean, that's
out.
like the meat birds that we get they can't be classed. I mean, they're technically GMO creatures because they've been selectively bred over the years, and like because they have such fast reproductive cycles, they can breed like generations at a time in a batch, and so they've been bred to grow within 42 days from hatchling to slaughter weight, where our meat birds, or our egg birds, are still chickens, right? But they wouldn't reach full weight, like process maturity, for 4 to 6 months. But they have been selectively bred for eggshell color, egg production, egg size and stuff like that. So there's all kinds of different ways to kind of slice and dice GMO.
So would it be fair to say that GMO meat products that come from actual animals are a lot safer than, let's say, something that is made that's like wheat or apples?
Well, you're getting a weird spot though, because
technically
the Roundup Ready corn is what the cattle are eating.
Right.
that's well, I guess you could.
I think
it just
90% of
depends.
corn in Nebraska is not even human for human consumption.
Most isn't. Like we
Yeah.
don't eat that much corn. We just shit it out anyway.
Whole also. I don't
Right.
understand. I remember chewing it.
Yeah. I was pretty sure I chewed my food pretty well.
Yeah.
And it gets put back
I
together.
don't think there's much nutritional value in corn.
Corn chips do taste good though.
Chris looks at me when he says that. There's fiber. That's why.
Yeah, that's
why it stays intact. So there's that good insoluble fiber that's good for gut health. But the interesting piece is just naturally what I've read is, and what I've experienced with my clients and patients is, it is just a natural sensitivity. So people are a little more like allergic or sensitive to it, and then we are putting it in everything.
Yeah.
So then you could look at like, the incidence of irritable bowel syndrome and all the GI issues that we're having, like what's causing all of that. And, this is an awesome conversation. We're probably terrifying the listeners right now. So
Our
for the
listeners are pretty.
sake of-
They deal with us.
A lot of our
Okay.
listeners have GMO'd themselves. So
Perfect.
it's
So
probably
we're
fine.
to the right target audience
probably
here. That's
fine.
fantastic. But what I tell people and what I tell the Creighton students too is you have to decide for yourself what you're comfortable with. So if you're really not comfortable with GMOs and the idea that there's pesticides on some of these foods, and then you don't have to buy those things. You can go all organic, and you can work around that. But you have to think about the fact that we have to produce huge amounts of food. And prior to industrialization in the 50s, we had really bad vitamin and mineral deficiencies that were affecting the overall health of the U.S. population. So industrialization came in, neutralized that, fixed our vitamin deficiencies because we had scurvy and we had pellagra and we had all these things that were just ugly and horrible to live through. And then now we've kind of tipped that scale to the other side, and now everything
To where everyone's obese.
Yes. And if you look back into like the 80s, talking about corn, right? So we had this overproduction of corn, and we tend to have an overproduction of corn and soy all the time, and that's why like processed foods tend to be corn or soy based, and there's a whole aisle of magical foods that have no natural origin at all,
ingredients in it
because they're
This isn't a real
using this
thing.
excess
Yeah.
corn and soy to make junk food that we buy. But where was I going with this? With the corn, they created high fructose corn syrup, right? Which then went into soda. And when a Coca-Cola used to be this like once in a while kind of deal, now it's something that people are drinking several times a day, every day of the week. And that is when it's kind of when high fructose corn syrup really started getting put into foods that we start to see that obesity rise.
So there was an interesting story. Remember, it was like 10 or so years ago, there was a bunch of colony collapse with bees. Mm-hmm. Remember hearing that? So I have a friend who's in Spokane, Washington, and he is an amateur bee farmer. And what they ended up finding out was the commercial bee farmers were using high fructose corn syrup in like the spring and the fall for the bees to give them like sugar water instead of actual sugar.
Wow.
And that high fructose corn syrup had enough of the pesticide in it that it was causing bees to die in colony collapse. So it was the amateur bee farmers who were still using real sugar water that ended up figuring that out.
Fascinating.
But I mean, a bee's
never heard of that.
very small compared to us, so they have a very small central nervous system. So they were more sensitive to it. But it's just the thing. What do you think about like stomach biomes? Because I would guess that the reason that a lot of our sensitivities, and my son had an issue when he was a teenager, I think the stomach biomes are off.
Yep. Well, okay. So if you think about our food culture and the amount of processed foods that are available. So if you go into a grocery store, only 15% of the food in a grocery store should go in your cart. So the other 85% is processed junk, low fiber, not natural. And that's the
All the
majority
good
of people
stuff.
are eating. Yeah, Brett, totally.
All the stuff in the middle,
Pop-Tarts.
right? That's where you stay,
Yeah.
right? Stay away from the edges, go to the middle.
Yep. And when you look at the fact that only 1 in 10 Americans are eating the recommended amount of vegetables, our diet is way off kilter as a society.
That's where
and
those
then
gummy multivitamins come in.
Yeah, you can offset that. Yeah, it's fine.
So then we're also teaching our kids to follow our adult eating patterns. So kids aren't eating vegetables and getting enough fiber. And then there was this big scare that hormones in milk were causing childhood obesity and were causing kids to develop prematurely. But it's not that. What research shows on pediatrics when children are overweight, your hormone triggers are stimulated by body mass. So if you are 5, 6, 7 years old and you weigh 100 pounds, your body is registering you as a 12, 13, 14-year-old. Okay. And so you will see like puberty type development in these younger kids because their body is recognizing their development based on body mass. So it has nothing to do with the hormones in the milk. But there's this immense fear for milk. And I am coming back to your question. This is a whole setup for this. And so milk and dairy products are an immense source of probiotics that regulate your gut health and create serotonin, dopamine, neurotransmitters that keep your mood up, fight depression, all these types of things. So we're getting these whole body issues because of the imbalance. And then our diet is not supportive of maintaining a healthy biome. So you're not feeding it with good probiotics because everyone's afraid of dairy now. This is a trend I have seen for like 5 years. And I'm like, I love my milk. Don't take my milk.
Yeah,
I need my
don't
milk.
get it.
And then we're also not eating the fiber that feeds that good bacteria.
And the vegetables.
Yep. So the vegetables are providing the fiber.
Yep.
The milk provides the bacteria. So we aren't doing that. So our gut biomes are getting really messed up. And then we're feeding it all this junk that is inflammatory and killing off the good bacteria even more.
You were talking about like recommended amounts, but like the food pyramid's kind of gone to shit over the years. It kind of ended up being almost kind of scammy. It seems like.
I would totally disagree.
But
you're the environment, like what you're hearing on major.
But because to me,
Keep
it's
going.
kind of like like Cheerios being part of the Heart Association, where you can just pay to get that badge on there. You know what I mean? Like, is it real? I'm not saying Cheerios aren't good. I love Cheerios. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying
Honey
how
Nut
much of it is
Cheerios.
it? And this isn't mean like some kind of weird conspiracy, but how much of it is it scammy? You know what I mean? Like,
Okay. You guys are asking me so many good questions that people need to hear.
because I mean, like I said, I'm not some kind of like government overwatch. Like I'm
No,
very pro
but-
like
I
small
feel like
government.
when I
get
was a kid, milk. It was like drink your milk, drink your milk every day. Then it's somewhere in like the late '90s, early 2000s, like don't drink milk.
I
It's
know.
bad for you.
And that's and like,
Well,
like I
eggs,
said,
eggs are good and then bad. Right?
Yeah.
Eggs are great for you, and then they're the worst
It's
thing ever.
like it changed. Pretty
But-
soon they're going to tell you not to use the toilet because it causes cancer.
I
that's
think
gas stoves right now.
Let's hope not. Let's
Gas
hope not.
stoves.
Brett, I think what you were talking about, they just said that like Frosted Flakes were healthier for you than steak. Is that what you were just talking about?
Well, I mean, I just like as far as like I'm just talking about like they'll put like these badges or stamps
Yeah.
on food, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, you have to meet like a what I would consider like a low threshold to qualify for this stuff, and then you pay and you can get kind of badges. So you
Yeah.
can get like they have some of this kind of like if you
Cheerios aren't bad for you. Cheerios are good for you.
I mean, I
think-
love Ulcer. I eat Pop
yeah,
Tarts every morning. I don't
think
care.
carbs have been demonized. I think that's maybe to your
Yes.
point.
Yeah.
But the problem is that most people associate carbs with donuts. Like we've talked about this, donuts, cakes, cookies, things like that, which all those carbs, they're carbs, but they also have an enormously amount of high processed fat in them.
Sounds like a
and that's the
great
problem. But like single
Krispy
ingredient,
Kreme.
single ingredient carbs are not bad for you.
Okay, let me tag off to Tanner real quick, and then we'll come back to the scam.
the
to
food
proving
pyramid.
you wrong.
So I call all the foods that Tanner just described junk food. I do not call them carbs.
Most people associate them
Yes,
with carbs.
I
yes.
totally agree with you. And so I'm really careful not to use that language because we've really generalized carbohydrates as junk. And so people honestly don't know that brown rice is not the same as that Krispy Kreme donut. It's a carb. I can't, And so there's this real confusion with
Yes.
carbohydrates. And so I'm really careful. And I kind of hope in time people will realize like that is junk food. And junk food is not actually a food group. So when you look at the food guide pyramid, there is no, maybe at the very, very tip was where they kind
Just
of
the tip, though.
But yeah, but not there isn't an actual food group. So chips, all these things. I ask people, what food group does that go into? And they're like,
Tummy.
Best one off to the side.
Yeah.
It's a potato.
It's
Yeah.
the addendum on the end. Yeah.
So when I talk about carbs, just like Tanner said, I'm talking brown rice, quinoa, whole wheat pasta, whole grain breads. You know, some of them are more processed than others, and it just depends on, again, your stance. So if you don't want processed food, you really need to go with like brown rice, quinoa, and just keep it very simple, very like basic, and
Boring.
you can build a super healthy diet off of that.
Potatoes.
I once had a person say, "How do you make quinoa taste good?" Which I thought was really funny. And I
Quinoa's
was
just
like,
weird. It gets stuck in my teeth all the time. That's all
it's
it
a weird.
does.
It's actually a little seed. It's not even a grain. It's a seed, but
Never
it's
been a fan.
super nutritionally dense. So you can use it in all kinds of fun ways that I won't go into right now in this podcast. People can come find me if they want to learn how to
Yeah.
use quinoa and
There
make
you
it
go.
taste good. So you make a great point, Tanner, about the confusion with carbs, and then as far as like the scamming and the like regulation, there's a lot of distrust with that. But if you just travel a little bit internationally and you come back to the U.S., you're kind of like, okay, thank God we've got the FDA. So our food supply is actually really well regulated. It is, I mean, if you think about the scope and the size of our country and how, I mean, when was the last time you guys got food poisoning?
Last time I ate lettuce.
I was gonna say it's always lettuce. That always.
Lettuce.
should never
get
When
lettuce.
was the
Problem.
last time you ate lettuce?
I don't know.
I always tell people, don't get
can't-
lettuce or tomato at a Subway or a fast food restaurant because you're just waiting to get E. coli. That's all you're waiting to get.
Yeah,
But you
that's
don't
probably.
hear about a lot of incidents of food poisoning
Yeah.
and things like that because of this regulation.
Yeah.
So like for a product to say it has 30% vitamin D, it has to have 30% vitamin D, and it has to match those requirements or it can't claim those types of things. So when you see food that says low fat, there's a guideline for that the FDA regulates. The best example I can give you is Kentucky Fried Chicken, like in 2004, came out with a low carb campaign, which was awesome. I drove by a restaurant one day and I was like, you have got to be freaking kidding me.
KFC
Because-
so
Is that
good.
that like
Now,
chicken sandwich
all
they
of my
made?
patients and all of my clients are going to be flocking to
Wasn't it?
KFC
Yeah.
because it's low carb,
carb.
right?
Yeah, it was like a chicken sandwich with the bun.
double down? What's it called? The double down?
bun
Yeah.
was the chicken.
Double down with bacon
Right?
in between.
I don't
It
know.
was like bacon
Oh,
and cheese. And
I
like
do
chicken
remember
through the
that.
bun.
Yeah, it was
That's
like
gotta
the
be
bun
low
was the
carb.
chicken breast. The bun was the chicken breast.
Super
yeah.
low
Oh,
carb.
yes. I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah.
I remember the name of
Hashtag
that.
keto.
Yeah. So, but KFC was claiming to be low carb, which in that time registered to people as healthy. Low carb means healthy. That's what we were associating low carb to mean.
Just more fat then.
Yes. Oh, and heart disease. I mean,
I think
Yeah.
the first thing that was demonized was fat.
well,
Like-
hold on one second. Let me finish my
Right.
thought. So the Federal Trade Commission regulates advertising on food and food labels, and they shut down that campaign in 2 weeks, which in the world of government processing,
ultra fast.
That's like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So that's how quick they were, and that's how on top of that they were. So there is regulation. There's mistakes and there's oversights and things like that. But what you're reading on the packages is what is validated. You
Yeah,
can't
but
trust that.
I
I'm
thi- I
sorry,
think-
Chris. I didn't mean to.
That's
interrupt
all
you.
right.
I just wanted to
Well, I think to your point is like, I think some of the distress is when you see these studies and then you see like, oh, Coca-Cola backed it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So like, I think
Yes.
that's some of the distress. It's like like for me, it's like, okay, here's the study. Okay, who funded it? I need to know who funded it so I know how I'm reading my information.
Yep.
Well, Coca-Cola also used to put cocaine.
Yeah, back in
Didn't
the
it?
good old
It
days.
should
Yeah.
still.
That's when people want to talk about the high fructose. It's probably better than cocaine, I suppose.
Or a lot of, or at least I get the impression that a lot of the food science and things that are done out there, the analysis are kind of done in a vacuum. So like if you look at like the glycemic index,
Oh.
if my understanding is like, and that's what a lot of people look at that as kind of like
Like
the gold
potatoes have a
standard,
very
right?
high glycemic.
And so it has like these foods, if you eat them and that's all you ate, then sure it has that. But as soon as you throw in some protein, you throw in a little bit of fat, like the glycemic index totally changes. And so I think that one in particular, it really stands out to me. But it feels like there's other, I don't know about
Factors.
there's other things that in these studies they're looked at kind of in a vacuum. So yes, if you're in this very narrow path, then 100% it's true. But as soon as you throw in like even a healthy rounded diet, that changes. So it's not the efficacy or the negative, whatever it is, changes and deviates from what is being claimed.
Yes, and that is honestly the problem and the confusion with the American diet is there's all this contextual research that gets pulled out of these huge research articles, and they kind of twist it a little to kind of make it say what they want to say. Like, I can think of a few examples. So there is a thought that it's been claimed. I remember on the Today Show one morning, I was listening to the news, and they said, science shows that walking burns more body fat than running. We'll be back with that story in just a minute. And I was like, oh, great. Here we go again. And again, it's how you pull out the context of the research, but they're not looking at the facts. So the idea is that lower intensity exercise burns more body fat. But when you do something that is higher energy expenditure, so let me change that. Lower intensity exercise primarily utilizes body fat. When you do something more high intensity, you're burning a greater volume of fat. So higher intensity exercise is going to burn more body fat, even though you're burning a higher mix of carbohydrate to fat. So that's where we get a lot of confusion between the keto diet, because people think if I can isolate, which the body is an amazing machine. And
Perfectly designed, yep.
Yes. So if you just let it do its thing, it will work for you. But if you think you can carb starve it, so I'm going to burn off all my body fat, doesn't quite work that way. So me and the keto and I do not get along. I will not.
Well, it's to your contextual thing. If you eat more fat, you burn more fat. But if you eat more fat, you also store more fat.
True.
At the end of the day, it's zero.
So true.
At the end of the day, it's the same.
Yes. And, the keto really goes to that premise that if I just carb starve myself, I'm going to burn more body fat, but you don't. You don't burn more. You're creating a calorie deficiency through the diet.
Yes.
Which is what leads to the weight loss, but you're not burning more body fat. You're burning primarily body fat. So if you just eat a healthy, balanced diet and you exercise at a higher intensity, you will actually burn more body fat altogether because that energy wheel is spinning faster. Does that make sense?
Yes. You were saying in keto, you would burn primarily fat. So that's why they say more.
Yep.
But you're actually burning more quantity of fat if you just have a balanced diet.
And you have carbohydrate in the mix. Because if you have carbohydrate in the mix, you can maintain a higher intensity for longer, which will allow you to utilize more of the stored body fat that you have. So it's, all contextual.
So I think that's where, like what Brett was saying earlier, I think that's where a lot of the mistrust comes in.
Yes.
So like people get cynical. Like, okay, Cheerios says heart healthy. Okay, I'm gonna call them. I'm calling bullshit.
Yeah, we never did come back to Cheerios.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing is that people pull the information out how they want to present it, and then the internet or the Today Show or whoever just spits this information out. They don't give you any kind of context with it.
Yes.
So then we start calling bullshit.
Yep.
And if you just read the whole, I mean, if you've ever read a scientific study, like they're not easy to read.
They're not.
You got to read the abstract, man.
And usually,
You can read that, but even the abstract, you're like,
And at the end of a nutrition research article, probably 99% of the time,
Results may vary.
it will say results are inconclusive. More research needs to be done because the human body is so unique, and then everybody is a little bit different.
Everybody's a fingerprint. Everybody's their own unique fingerprint.
And
their whole body
so
is.
the research needs to be replicated a lot, and it needs to be replicated on large groups. And most studies don't have the capacity to really do that. So the idea is we keep doing more research until we see consistent results, and then we can finally make a conclusion. So you got to read the whole article.
I think the things about on Today Show too. Like, you got to think about who's watching the Today Show, right? Do those people that are probably watching the Today Show like, man, I can't wait to go out for a run, or they're going to see like a little tidbit like that, be like, oh, if I walk, I can burn. Oh, I'm definitely going to hang
told you
out
I should run.
I
Yeah, thank God.
I knew it.
Put my shape
The
ups
Today
on.
Show
We're
told
getting
me it
after
was
this.
perfect. Yeah,
Exactly.
And then, like I said before, I think the first thing that was demonized was fat, and that's when margarine and all that stuff came in. And then I don't think fat's really that as bad as everyone thinks it is. Like good fats, not like trans
ribeyes.
fat. And yeah, exactly. Like real fat, not like real butter. That stuff. It's not bad. It's not bad for you.
it's
Moderation.
a process. Yeah, it's
moderation.
Yeah, it's all in moderation.
Yeah, but those fats are way better for you than the made fats. Like trans fats and all that other stuff like that.
Yes. And you're totally right, Chris, because if you look at the diet trends, like I think I remember Snackwell's cookies coming out when I was in high school, which are like a fat-free cookie. Do you guys remember Snackwell's?
Yes.
They were like perfectly moist
Devil's
and
food or
delicious.
something like that, is
Yes.
what they're called? Yeah.
Yes. Those are the
Yeah.
ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it was,
course
that's
you
kind of
remember.
where I remember like fat-free foods
Oh,
coming
yes,
out
I can
and
eat
kind of
some
taking over the
snacks.
market. Yes. But then I think like fat-free cheese is terrible.
Yes.
Right. So fat adds texture
vegan cheese.
and flavor.
Well, I feel like when it's low something, they add something else.
They have to.
That's kind of like
Yeah.
like if it's low fat, it's probably higher
just take
carb
it
or
out.
higher
It's
sugar.
higher
Usually
sugar.
it tends to be higher sugar.
Yeah. And if
It's usually bad
if-
sugar. It's not
yeah.
real sugar either.
Yeah.
So
Well,
just
again,
go with the real fat.
And if it says keto on it, you know it has a shit ton of fat in it.
Yep.
I.e. tastes good.
Yes.
Well, also fat adds a lot of flavor, right? And so that's why when you go out to eat, foods are really high in fat because that's what makes it good and makes you want to go
So
back.
are the people.
They put butter on everything when you go out to
Yeah.
eat.
Yes, they
Here we
do.
are.
Yeah.
Because there's a food expectation with that. And so we kind of went low fat crazy, and then we realized that wasn't the way to go. We were hungry all the time.
Then it went Atkins right after that. I feel
Yeah.
like Atkins
Atkins
came
was
like
like
then
that.
it went
worse,
low
though.
carb.
I think carbs are the
Atkins kind of
demons.
took over.
Yeah.
You know, the one macronutrient that really hasn't been demonized would be protein. It's like the darling
Not yet.
child.
Except it'll give you kidney stones.
Oh yeah. And there was that.
Kidney
Yeah.
stones.
Yes, you
And
can
if you
get
drink-
too much protein. Yeah,
And if you drink a protein shake, you're just going to be swole. So
that's right.
Well, depends with, yeah.
yeah.
What how long have you been doing this now?
Oh, so I became a registered dietitian in 2002.
Okay, so you've seen a lot of like really dumb diet fads. What do you think is the dumbest one you've seen? And you won't insult anybody because we don't care about the people.
What is the dumbest?
Just
one
our
I've
dozens
seen?
of
They're all
listeners.
frustrating in their own way, but I honestly feel like the keto one has been the most stressful for me.
Because of CrossFit made it so popular.
No, it was paleo.
It
was
that was
paleo.
Paleo,
Wasn't
yeah.
Atkins before keto though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So then
Well, Atkins seems like worse because you're not cutting out all carbs. You're just going super low. So you're still trying to burn carbs and you're just fucking tired and miserable.
Yeah, you're in a weird like energy space with Atkins.
Okay. And I
Yeah.
feel like Atkins, from my recollection, wasn't quite as stringent as keto, though.
Well, in
True.
keto,
It
you
was
actually
just-
have to test your pee, don't you? And to do
Yeah.
real
You get
keto,
the blow
Get the
thing for
ketones.
and then you
blowing it.
smell bad normally too.
Your
Yes.
breath is terrible.
You can eat all the bacon you want, though.
It's true.
Just saying.
What was the real difference between carnivore and keto though? Aren't they pretty fucking
They'd be
similar
pretty
though?
similar.
They're pretty much the same, but carnivore is just like all meat. So like
It's only animal.
Yeah. So,
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, in keto you could eat
So-
cheese.
Or not carnivore. Yeah, what was the
was
the
carnivore.
the CrossFit one? Was that
Paleo.
Paleo. Okay.
So
what's
paleo is like nuts and seeds. Could be.
Oh, that's
you-
right. They
but-
said that
and
whatever
sweet
caveman
potatoes.
ate, but then
Yeah,
I said if
exactly.
a caveman found a fucking Snickers, he's going to tear that bitch up.
Yeah.
Like, don't act
Right.
like he's not
Okay,
going
Brad,
to.
like my thing with the paleo is I don't want to hunt and gather my food.
I
want
hunted the
to
grocery store and I'm
go-
100% successful.
I know. I just want to go to the store and get my food. Like I don't want to have to, starve out chasing a buffalo, hoping that it's my big day. So the paleo just cracks me up because I'm like, do we really want to eat like that?
Well, the only carb caveman ate was sweet potatoes. If you didn't know,
right.
Oh, I did.
Well, that's
yeah,
that's
just
what I
ask the
said. They're
paleo
like,
person; they'll let you know.
that's what I said. It's like they only ate what they found, and I was like, yeah. But if they found a bunch of shit food, they would have ate that too.
Yeah, they'd eat whatever.
They
And
did.
Yeah, you find the Twix vine. I'm all
I
over
feel
it.
like the caveman now would be like, you guys are so stupid. This was a terrible way to live. Like, get your act together.
Yeah, if I could have ate all this other shit, I totally would have.
Yes. So
Yeah.
paleo always was kind of a joke to me. And what I found with paleo is if you were active, it did not support activity. So people would be like, I'm on the paleo diet, but I get low blood sugars all the time. And
it's
I'm like,
full-
well,
that
let's
was
eat
They say
full
more.
only eat
CrossFit.
sweet potatoes,
They could eat sweet potatoes.
but that's the only thing they could eat. That was the.
So
Yeah, that was the-
whatever. And
that
then they'd be
was-
like,
yeah,
I don't
like-
like sweet potatoes. And I'm like, then
Which
don't
is really
eat them.
counterintuitive because CrossFit was the big pusher of it.
Well,
Yes.
yeah. And well, that's why if you a lot of CrossFitters all get to a certain spot, and then they all kind of look the same. They
And then
all
they
look
GMO
good.
themselves to get better.
Well, and then you have like Matt Fraser's like, I eat a pizza.
Wasn't he also like, I drink a gallon of milk before I train or something like that?
It was
Yeah.
something crazy. Yeah, but he went all carb crazy because it made his performance better. He only won like 4 times in a row.
yeah, don't worry. Hey guys, they're
But
drug
again, there's
tested.
that carb mix, right? You have to have the
Yeah,
carbs.
you have to have carbs.
drugs.
Even if you're a strength-focused athlete, you have to have carbs.
Yeah.
And that's been the interesting piece. And not that you have to have as many carbs as I do to go do some trail run or something, but you have to have carbs in there to
I just think the low carb thing is just stupid.
drives me crazy.
It just drives me nuts. I think any diet where you're like eliminating any kind of macronutrient is not good. It's a matter of balance.
It's not
Thank you.
sustainable.
It
Not
isn't
sustainable
sustainable
at all.
Yeah, I think most people they're too low in protein. Most women are too low in protein.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
I talk a lot about protein, and the research on menopausal women really actually highlights using whey protein supplementation. And so it kind of cracks me up because I have these 55, 60-year-old women that are working with me that are just kind of getting into exercise and things like that. And I'm like, okay, let's add a whey protein supplement. And they're like, what?
I don't want to get too bulky.
Yeah. and
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's
no,
the
we're doing it.
same,
We're doing
same
it.
thing
But
every
the
day.
research really supports it. And I'm 46 and I really struggle to hold muscle, which again, I'm so glad that I got into the strength training when I did, because it's been pretty life-changing for me. But I really do have to focus on the protein piece, because with being a runner, I can get a little carb focused.
Yep.
And so I have to just be super intentional with that. But it's been a game changer to bring that in. And I talk about the macronutrients. They're a team. We're always looking to demonize one.
Right.
And I'm like, no, carbs are our friend, which is so hard for people to comprehend. But I'm like, they're a team. So when you've got the macronutrients balanced out, and so I usually recommend I start everybody at a 50% of their calories coming from carbs, 20% from protein, 30% from fat. Matt, I think I even set you up on that.
What happened to you?
Because your goals needed
Yeah.
that, though.
Yeah.
Your goals needed that, because for what you wanted to achieve, we had to get
Yeah.
that balanced out, and you had really good results.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, yes, you did. And so I start people there. Now, for like menopausal women, sometimes that carb amount can be a little too high, just depending on their activity level and just their hormonal balance. But even if I bring their carbs down, I'll only bring them down to like 45% and then maybe up their protein or fat. It's hard to get more than 20% protein, guys, unless you're like really supplementing and your diet's super meat based, following the basic guidelines. You guys are looking at me like, whatever,
it's like-
Nikki.
I find like hitting the protein
I have no
target
problem
is
getting the
super
protein.
easy.
I'm all.
Maybe if you're getting
super
those
easy.
vegetables in there, it's hard to.
So when you're working with someone, do you, like you talk about the hormonal, are you doing blood work with people?
No,
'Cause
I don't have
I know
that
people
kind
who
of-
do blood work, which is like average
every day.
and I like they're checking their blood sugars, and I was like, get the fuck out of here. That is not real life. You are not going to get all your clients to do their blood work or check or prick their finger every
I mean, a
morning
blood
and see
sugar
what
is
their
easy, but like
glucose
real
is.
legit blood work, that's like $400 a pop.
But
at
just to have
least.
somebody to even have a machine and prick their finger and check their glucose every morning, get out of here.
Yeah. So no, and I don't need that kind of blood work reporting to get people results, because a lot of times it's just reshaping and balancing and what they tell me, and kind of looking at the phase of life they're in, what they're telling me, what symptoms they're having. Usually I can kind of correlate all that together and then give them a diet recommendation. The continuous glucose monitoring, though, is really taking off in the endurance field. So like in cycling and cycling especially.
So you guys putting in those
Some
things like
elite runners.
diabetics use that goes to their phone?
Yes. So they are using.
I thought Gatorade had something that you could buy now. You'd stick it on you and tells you if you're not hydrated enough. Same kind of thing, but not
Wow.
quite as, yeah.
Just
I have not heard
hooks
of
up to
that.
your phone.
I don't
Yeah,
think so.
they're all
I think you
phone
like
apps,
stick it on
right?
and it'll tell you if you're like, you're dehydrated, you need to drink more Gatorade. Same kind of thing, but obviously
that's
not
kind of-
as
It
not
just
as-
never shuts
not
off.
as glucose,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah.
Which there's a time and place for Gatorade, and it's a pretty narrow time and space. So
See,
yeah.
where are you at
There's
on
another good tip.
like we've talked with Stan Efferding before, who does the vertical diet, and he's very pro. Like most people are short on sodium, and he's not. He's kind of anti.
Most people are short on sodium.
Yeah,
From a performance standpoint.
and he said so. He's very anti like liquid, like Gatorade and stuff like that. So he does like thermo tabs, like just salt tabs.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean his big thing is he pushed from a sodium standpoint, he's huge. So he's like 5 grams of sodium, roughly, is what he's
Okay.
pushing a day. And I think it's
And he does. In Stan's credit, he does. It's all medically researched. Like he's not just like off the cuff,
I
like
think he
throwing
gets
it
his
out there.
blood work done all the time.
That
does.
guy, yeah, literally like lives at a blood center. I
Yeah.
feel like.
Yeah.
okay.
it's really cool. I think I have his have you heard of it or like
I haven't.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I have a digital copy of his book. I'll send you.
Yeah, he does like
Okay.
it's very much like meat and rice and vegetables. Like he calls it just what monster mash.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
gut
his whole
health, like
thing is
broth,
like he
bone
gives
broth.
I don't know, we'll say 10 foods that you have to get every day. So it's like a sweet potato, like 2 cups of spinach, 2
Sodium from like
eggs,
pickles.
sodium, potassium, and a couple other things. And like you hit all those things through your food, and then everything else you backfill with white rice and lean red meat is kind of
Okay.
what his whole thing bases around. But his point, which a lot of people go against, is sodium roughly 5-ish grams of sodium a day, and then upwards of, I can't remember the potassium, but I think potassium's like 1,500 milligrams or something, maybe
Yeah, I would say that
2,000
most
milligrams of
Americans are
potassium.
not deficient in sodium; they're deficient in potassium and magnesium.
Yeah, and so but he pushes that. It's kind of what he goes through. But I know because I talked to my father-in-law before, like shortly after had his heart attack, and his doc like immediately cut him down to like 1,000 milligrams of sodium. And I was like, well. And so I was talking to him, and my wife was eventually like, you should probably shut up, because he's not going to do the other things. Like, he's not going to do any kind of training or do any other like diet changes to support.
But if you follow
having
like
that.
Stan's diet, like you're going to be deficient in sodium because there's nothing with sodium.
Yeah,
Basically,
Yes.
you'll have a full
Yeah,
sodium
there's-
deficiency.
Yeah,
The foods you were just listed out, I was like, well, there's no sodium.
there's no sodium
Right.
in any of them.
And taking a thermotabs before you work out, you do feel better.
Yeah. So looking kind of with just what you guys presented right there, individually is the first, like, I'm going to come at every single person individually and see what their
Yeah.
health conditions are, what their exercise level is, because if you're not exercising, you're not excreting sodium, you're not having high sodium losses, and then see what kinds of foods they're eating and what's contributing to their sodium levels. Now, when I was a student at UNO, I was working in a hospital, and I was working in the diet office, running like meal plans and things for people. And at that time in 2002, nope, sorry, it would have been like 2000. 1999, a regular diet in the hospital was a 5,000 milligram sodium diet. Yep, that was a normal diet, 5,000 milligrams. Then flash forward, I think, to 2010, when the dietary recommendations came out again. They dropped it down to the 2,400. And so now the recommendation for most Americans is 2,400. And then if you have heart conditions or high blood pressure, it's 1,500.
So
Those are the numbers.
Sodium keeps water in the bloodstream, and potassium keeps water in like the skeletal muscle. Is that kind of how that works?
Okay, so let me think this through. Those are great questions. So the body has to regulate a certain amount of sodium in your blood. I think you need it's 500, I think, milligrams per deciliter, I think. People don't hold me to that, but I think that's what it is. So your body is constantly regulating that balance. And so if you end up being low, then you will shed water to concentrate the sodium levels. If your sodium levels are higher than that, you will hold water to dilute it, right? So your body's always fluctuating the fluid levels. So if you have high blood pressure and you're eating a high sodium diet, you're holding more fluid to dilute those sodium levels, which puts more pressure on your heart. So that's why when someone has high blood pressure or cardiac issues, we want them. It's important that they're on a low sodium diet because we want them to be regulating their body fluids and not holding extra water. So when I work with somebody, because I know that once upon a time, the regular diet was 5,000 milligrams, if they don't have high blood pressure, they're exercising, they're eating a balanced diet, and their sodium intake is between 3,000 to 4,000, 5,000. I'm like, I don't really care. Like, there's, you're
Is that one of the
fine.
things that you monitor when like you're training someone? Are you looking that detailed?
I can't get the numbers necessarily unless
Yeah.
they bring me their blood work from their doctor, but you can tell from performance and how they recover. And
But as far as like if they're, because I know when we worked, like everything was logged in MyFitnessPal, and you looked at it.
Yes.
Is that
Which
so
that's a
you're
fantastic
I will
app. If
use-
people don't use it, you
It's-
should get MyFitnessPal.
Right.
amen to that.
And
I
like even
totally
if you
agree.
want like the fancy version, it's I think $100 for the year.
Yeah, it's like
And you
$9.99 a month
And
or
you can
something.
track pretty much everything you want all the way down. You can set goals all the way down to like the micronutrient level
Yeah.
and stuff. So it's
and
really
it
cool.
raised it. You learned a lot from doing that.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. So, but that's so, yes. So the sodium, as far as like using thermotabs, for the gentleman that I can't remember his name. Who's
Stan Efforting.
Stan, thank you. So for him, yes, I would probably, as a sports dietitian, looking at his diet versus his exercise, I would add in salt supplements into his workouts because he's not getting enough through his diet. He's excreting a lot through the exercise he's doing. So you have to bring it in from somewhere. So in the world of endurance athletics, like after an hour of exercise, you have to start supplementing with sodium as well because you're excreting so much so fast that if you don't start bringing it in through a sports drink, Gatorade, or through like thermotabs or something like that, then neurologically you're not as focused. Your form starts to fall apart. You start to fatigue, and your performance will suffer. You can get hyponatremia, which can be fatal. So there's a lot of things that can come from endurance athletics if you're not supplementing.
So on the sodium side, where are you at on like water intake? Because like it always used to be like people of our slender size, like Matt and I and Tanner, Chris is, whatever.
He's almost full grown.
But it was always like, try and drink a gallon of water. But like Stan would talk about, you're basically washing it out. If your pee is like they say, if your pee is clear, it's great. Well, then he's like, you've actually washed out a lot of your nutrients if your pee is clear. Now it doesn't need to be whatever color yours was when you drank all weekend.
Ooh, like
neon,
dirty mud water.
Yeah.
like light lemonade.
When it's brown, that's bad.
So people, I think a lot of people have that. They're like, well, I try to drink a gallon of water every day. But I also feel like when I try to drink a gallon of water, I'm just more thirsty.
Well, again, it could be due to like electrolyte balance and that.
And I do like element drinks. I just put them in like a half a gallon, those little element packs just throughout the day. But yeah, I think there's a misconception on water too. Everybody just thinks you have to hammer water. Like
I used to drink a lot of water when I was losing weight just because I was hungry.
Right.
yeah,
I did a
you should have started
shitload of, like-
smoking. I heard smoking helps when you're hungry.
I used to
Chew
start
and
drinking a lot
smoke.
of
Cut
water.
that stuff. You won't be hungry at all.
Oh man,
Just gut your jaw.
gallon of water here. All right, I'm not hungry anymore.
So water is definitely important, and a lot of people don't drink enough. But you don't.
Oh,
have
I
to
drink enough,
do
just
this,
not enough
like,
water.
Excessive amount of it. So somewhere between 64 to 90 ounces a day is pretty adequate. If you're more active, you probably need to be towards the 90. If you're not very active, 64 will cover you pretty well. But yeah, lately it's interesting you guys bring that up because I feel like lately everyone's been like, so I'm drinking like 150 ounces of water per day. Is that okay? And I'm kind of like, where are you getting that from? And why?
How do you?
It takes a lot of effort, especially like as it
Yeah.
gets colder outside. It takes a lot of effort to drink a gallon of water.
Yep. Well, and again, in the cold, your body is acclimating to a different, you're not sweating and losing fluids, so your need goes down too.
I
Like
try not to sweat at all, really.
temperature and environment.
We know.
You sweat tying your shoes.
Yeah, but not working out. Isn't that weird?
No, he glistens. He doesn't sweat yet.
So I don't know, I have a lot of people that are using the element and things like that. And I don't know that everybody needs it. So, but if you are active and you're struggling to recover and feel that like thirst quenching, then you probably do need a little bit of a electrolyte boost to balance and recover. And that's okay to use that and that's safe to use. But I feel like there's like high school kids just sitting around drinking these electrolyte drinks.
Right.
And,
Well, it's a flavor thing, and that's what I think is hard with a lot of people who drink water. It's just water. You know what I mean? You can do Crystal Light, or I've done like BCAAs, or I've done the element drinks. Like I feel like it's just something to add flavor to the water.
That's
Is more
true,
than
too.
anything.
Now the element tea, I think, is 1,000 milligrams of sodium per packet. So just want to throw out like, there's a
not
time and
just
place for that.
flavor,
Yeah,
yeah.
you don't want to like, go crazy with
Right.
that and have
Not
that
like
all
the
day long
Mio.
because you are getting other sodium from your food choices too.
Yeah.
But if you need that pick me up and that kind of balancing out, it will definitely do that. It will definitely do that.
Well, and a lot of the electrolyte drinks don't have potassium in there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I don't think potassium's talked about or like in most general
Yeah, it
conversations.
used to be just like eat a banana, you'll be good.
Yeah.
And from what I know and what I have heard, the American population is typically not potassium deficient. Sodium we excrete a lot more sodium than we do potassium. So even when you look at the electrolyte supplements, they're much heavier in sodium chloride than they are in potassium. The other thing is dietitians do not recommend potassium supplements because if you get high concentrations of potassium in your blood, it could stop your heart. Just so you
Yes.
know,
Lights
people.
out.
Yep. So we don't recommend potassium supplements because that's just not smart from a medical standpoint. And typically, again, I've worked at One World Community Health Center for the last 6 years and I just left. So I was looking at medical records all over the place and maybe 1 out of 150 to 200 and maybe even less than that have low potassium levels.
Yeah.
So most people sit pretty well with potassium.
It's that when you reference like low normal potassium levels or any kind of like micronutrient level, is that from like a standpoint of, I don't know what you'd call like an average American versus?
There is a scientific range
Okay.
that is established. And some of the ranges I have memorized, some of them I have to look up, but they are from the textbook
Yeah.
of what your body kind of needs and what range would be normal for that. So
Nice.
science, Matt.
So
science.
neat.
Yeah.
So neat.
What would you put out as your, unless anybody has like any other in-depth things we want to talk about? Anybody got anything?
go ahead and ask your closing question, Brett.
Like, what do you think is your easiest diet tip and I still think diet should be replaced with lifestyle because you have to live a certain way. You know what I mean? And it's not, if you make it a lifestyle that's people like, it's easier to do. It's like if you like your job, you're going to go to it, right? If you like your diet, you'll do it. What's like your best tip that you give to people for?
Yeah. So I have learned through doing a ton of nutritional assessments that if you have at least 3 food groups at every meal and 2 at every snack, so whether you do like a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, morning, afternoon snack, if you do that and you have 3 food groups in your meals, 2 food groups in your snacks, by the end of the day, you will have pretty much reached most of your nutritional needs, and your carbohydrate, protein, and fat will be balanced really close to that 50% carbohydrate, 20% protein, 30% fat. And that kind of amazed me. As I was doing these nutrition assessments and kind of breaking things down, I really noticed that that pattern almost always guaranteed those goals. And the reason why, I think, is when you force that 3rd food group in, you really have to focus on that fruit or vegetable.
So it's not the chips food group.
It's not the chips food group. So
Pop-Tarts?
you mentioned the food guide pyramid. I mean, you can trust the 5 food group model. You really can just go back to the simplicity of that. And there's the Choose My Plate model now, which is what the dietary guidelines base their recommendations off of. So the pyramid's out. There's no more pyramid. The plate is much more teachable. So if you use that plate model, it's called My Plate. You can go to myplate.gov and look it up, and have at least 3 of those food groups. You will seriously overhaul your diet, and it will be normal and healthy and balanced and easy.
All right. Where can people find you if they would like to reach out to you?
Yeah, so right now the best way to reach me is to email me, which is NK for my initials, Niki Kubiak, so nksportsnutrition@gmail.com.
All right. Anybody have anything else they would like to ask her before we close this shit show out?
This is a very controlled shit show today.
I will
was.
just
It was
say
pretty,
this was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Thank you
good
for
to have
coming
like
on.
an actual adult in the room.
Yeah, yeah. Does everybody got to tell a poop story though? For a guest?
We pooped in the airplane.
No. The
Oh,
guest
did
gotta
she
tell
has a
poop
bad
story.
shit?
Do
Oh,
you
I'm
have a-
sure.
Do you have a
I
poop
guarantee
story?
she
As
shit
a
in the woods.
runner.
She does
Yeah, I mean,
century
yeah.
runs or does high mount. I guarantee
I've
you
only
shit in the
done
woods.
150 miler,
And you shit in the woods, didn't you?
and I made it all the way. But I
What?
know that is not going to be the
Have you shit
case.
your pants running?
I never have it, but
She doesn't even try that hard.
hold on. I have figured out what I need to eat prior to running so I don't get sick out there. That's how good I am.
I just say you don't really know your limits as an adult until you shit your pants at least once.
I will note that, and I will keep working towards
So
that.
she has not as an adult then. Okay, well she's better than us at this.
Yeah,
Maybe the 100-miler she'll poop her pants.
That's probably true, or at least for sure in the woods
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
So, yes.
All right. Forgot to mention our show sponsors. Or our partners. Tanner doesn't give a shit for sponsorship on this deal. Elite Nutrition Omaha. EliteNutritionOmaha.com. Use code B3 at checkout for 10% off. Go in the
I've had
store.
a lot of people yelling B3 in the store. Handing
Free
out
shakers. Free shakers if you yell B3 in the store. Also, Rosewood Block. They make the best barbecue cutting boards in the game. Fully customizable. Check them out. RosewoodBlock.com. Use B3 at checkout for 10% off. We want to thank Niki for coming in. It was pretty awesome, pretty educational.
Yes.
Little let down. She doesn't shit herself, but she'll be part of the group someday. You just wait. And we want to thank all of our dozens and dozens of listeners. And like, subscribe, follow. And like we were saying, the words of Andy Frisella, don't be a hoe. Share the show. We'll see you guys.